The doctor's office was small, discreet, located in a part of Los Angeles where celebrities could come and go without being recognized. It was 1934, and Katharine Hepburn sat across from a physician who had just confirmed what she already suspected. She was pregnant. For most women, this would be a moment of joy, terror, confusion, or some combination of all three. For Hepburn, it was a crisis that threatened to end the career she'd spent years building. Because in 1934 Hollywood, there was one absolute rule for actresses: you could not be pregnant and working. Not visibly pregnant, not secretly pregnant, not pregnant at all. This is the story of the choice Katharine Hepburn made in that doctor's office. A choice that was illegal, dangerous, and according to her decades later, absolutely right. A choice that revealed something fundamental about who she was and what she valued. A choice that millions of women faced in secret, and one woman eventually discussed without apology. Understanding what Hepburn faced requires understanding Hollywood in the 1930s. The studio system controlled every aspect of actors' lives. Contracts included morality clauses that could be triggered by anything deemed inappropriate. For actresses, pregnancy outside marriage was immediate grounds for termination. But even pregnancy within marriage was career-ending unless carefully managed. The logic was brutally simple. Pregnant women couldn't work. They showed. They got tired. They needed time off. And audiences, studios believed, didn't want to see pregnant women on screen. Pregnancy made actresses unsexy, unavailable, too real. So pregnancy meant one of two things: a shotgun wedding, followed by career hiatus, or termination of the pregnancy. There was no third option. You couldn't be pregnant and keep working. You couldn't be pregnant and maintain your star status. Pregnancy was incompatible with being a leading lady in Hollywood. Hepburn was 27 years old when she discovered she was pregnant. She'd been in Hollywood for 2 years. She'd won an Oscar for Morning Glory in 19. She was on the verge of major stardom, with multiple projects lined up, with her career finally gaining momentum after early struggles. The pregnancy was not from her brief marriage to Ludlow Ogden Smith, which had effectively ended years earlier, though they wouldn't divorce until 1934. The father's identity has been speculated about for decades. Some historians suggest it was Agent Leland Hayward. Others point to different possibilities, but Hepburn never confirmed or denied any theory. What mattered to her wasn't who the father was. What mattered was what the pregnancy meant for her future. She spent perhaps a day considering her options. Could she hide it? Wear looser clothes? Film strategically? No. Pregnancy eventually shows, and Hollywood had eyes everywhere. Could she have the baby? Give it up for adoption? Possible, but the career interruption would be months long, and someone would eventually figure it out. Could she get married quickly, have the baby, play the respectable wife and mother? That last option was what most actresses did. A hasty marriage to legitimize the pregnancy, a year or two away from the screen. Then maybe, if you were lucky and still young enough, a comeback attempt. Most comebacks failed. The audience had moved on. Younger actresses had taken your place. Hepburn looked at these options and saw no acceptable choice among them. Every option meant giving up her career, at least temporarily, and probably permanently. Every option meant letting her body's biology dictate her professional future. Every option meant surrender. So she chose a fourth option, the illegal one, the dangerous one, the one that could kill her or leave her unable to have children in the future or land her in jail if discovered. She chose abortion. In 1934, abortion was illegal in California and every other state in America. It would remain illegal nationally for another 39 years. Women who wanted abortions had to find doctors willing to break the law, often paying enormous sums, risking infection, hemorrhage, and death from botched procedures. Thousands of women died every year from illegal abortions. Thousands more were left sterile or permanently injured. But wealthy women with connections, women like Katharine Hepburn, could find doctors who performed relatively safe illegal abortions. These doctors charged premium prices and demanded absolute discretion, but they had actual medical training and sterile equipment. The procedure was still risky, still illegal, still dangerous, but it was survivable. Hepburn found such a doctor. She paid in cash. She told no one except perhaps one trusted friend who drove her there and picked her up after. She went to the appointment, had the procedure, spent a day recovering, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. The physical recovery took weeks. The emotional impact, according to her later reflections, was minimal. She didn't grieve. She didn't regret. She didn't spend years wondering about the child that might have been. She'd made a practical decision based on clear priorities. Her career mattered more than potential motherhood. Her autonomy mattered more than societal expectations. Her future mattered more than a fetus. This cold calculation bothers people even now. We're supposed to believe that abortion is always traumatic, always difficult, always accompanied by grief and doubt and soul-searching. For Hepburn, it was none of those things. It was a problem that needed solving, and she solved it. Then she moved on. She kept the secret for decades. Through the rest of the 1930s, through the 1940s and 50s and 60s, she worked continuously, making dozens of films, winning more Oscars, becoming one of the greatest actresses in cinema history. She never married again. She never had children. She never expressed any regret about either choice. It wasn't until the 1970s, after Roe v. Wade had legalized abortion nationally, that Hepburn began speaking about reproductive rights. Even then, she didn't immediately reveal her own experience. But in interviews, she'd make pointed comments about women's need for choice, about how pregnancy could destroy careers, about how her generation had faced impossible decisions. Finally, in the 1990s, in her 80s, she confirmed it. Yes, she'd had an abortion in the 1930s. Yes, it had been illegal. Yes, she'd do it again. No, she didn't regret it. No, she wouldn't apologize for it. No, she didn't think it was anyone's business but hers. The confirmation caused controversy even in the 1990s. Anti-abortion activists condemned her. Some fans were shocked. Conservative groups called her a murderer. None of it bothered Hepburn in the slightest. She'd made her choice 60 years earlier. Public opinion about it now was irrelevant. What's remarkable about Hepburn's abortion story is her complete lack of ambivalence about it. She never framed it as a tragic necessity. She never claimed it was the hardest decision of her life. She never said she wished circumstances had been different, so she could have kept the pregnancy. She simply stated that she chose her career over potential motherhood and never regretted that choice. This clarity was radical in the 1930s and remains radical now. We're culturally comfortable with abortion stories that involve anguish and regret. We're comfortable with "I had no choice" narratives. We're less comfortable with "I chose my ambition over a pregnancy, and I'm fine with that." But that was Hepburn's story. She wanted to be a great actress more than she wanted to be a mother. When those two possibilities came into conflict, she chose acting without hesitation. The pregnancy was an obstacle to what she actually wanted, so she removed the obstacle. The decision revealed something fundamental about how Hepburn viewed her own life and body. She didn't believe her biological capacity for reproduction created any obligation to reproduce. She didn't believe pregnancy was sacred or inevitable, or something to be accepted regardless of her own wishes. She believed her body existed to serve her goals, not the other way around. This instrumentalist view of reproduction was shocking in 1934 and remains controversial now. We're supposed to believe that reproduction is special, separate, governed by different rules than other biological functions. Hepburn didn't see it that way. Pregnancy was a physical condition that conflicted with her professional goals. She addressed it the way she'd address any other conflicting physical condition, by seeking medical intervention. The risk she took doing this illegally was enormous. If she'd been discovered, her career would have been destroyed more thoroughly than if she'd had the baby. Abortion wasn't just illegal, it was moral scandal of the highest order. An actress who'd had an abortion would have been blacklisted, shunned, possibly prosecuted. The same studio system that forced women to choose between pregnancy and career would have destroyed anyone caught choosing illegal abortion. Hepburn understood these risks and decided they were worth it. She trusted herself to keep the secret. She trusted the doctor to be discreet. She trusted that her determination to control her own reproductive destiny was worth gambling her entire career on an illegal procedure. She won that gamble. The procedure succeeded. She recovered. She kept the secret. And her career flourished precisely because she'd been willing to break the law to prevent pregnancy from derailing it. This raises uncomfortable questions about privilege and access. Hepburn could afford a relatively safe illegal abortion. She had connections to find a competent doctor. She had money to pay premium prices. Women without those advantages died trying to end unwanted pregnancies. Hepburn acknowledged this privilege in her later discussions of reproductive rights. She'd been lucky, she said, lucky to have money and connections, lucky to survive. But she never apologized for using her privilege to access the abortion she needed. Survival isn't something to apologize for. The decision not to have children extended beyond that one pregnancy. Hepburn could have gotten pregnant again. She had relationships. She could have chosen motherhood later when her career was more established. She never did. By all accounts, she never wanted to. The 1934 abortion wasn't a tragic sacrifice of wanted motherhood for career. It was an elimination of unwanted pregnancy that happened to also protect her career. This distinction matters. Too many abortion stories are framed as women tragically giving up children they wanted because of impossible circumstances. Hepburn's story was different. She didn't want children, period. Not in 1934. Not in 1944. Not ever. The pregnancy was unwanted from the beginning. The abortion was relief, not tragedy. Her view of motherhood was characteristically blunt. In interviews over the years, she'd say things like, "I would have been a terrible mother," or "Children would have destroyed everything I wanted," or "I never understood the appeal of motherhood." This honesty scandalized people who believed all women naturally wanted children. Hepburn didn't care. She knew herself. She knew what she wanted. Motherhood wasn't part of it. She didn't hate children. She was fond of her nieces and nephews, but she didn't want the responsibility and sacrifice that came with having her own. She wanted to be an actress, not a mother. The cultural assumption that all women want children, that motherhood is women's natural destiny and highest calling, made Hepburn's choice incomprehensible to many people. She must have been traumatized by the abortion, they insisted. She must have deep regrets. She must have wondered about the child that might have been. She must have been damaged by the decision. She wasn't. She was fine. Better than fine. She was exactly what she wanted to be, a great actress, an independent woman, someone who'd controlled her own destiny and succeeded on her own terms. The abortion wasn't a wound. It was a tool she'd use to build the life she wanted. When Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, Hepburn was 66 years old. Nearly 40 years had passed since her illegal abortion. She could have stayed silent about her experience. Instead, she became quietly supportive of abortion rights, contributing to organizations, making public statements about women's need for reproductive autonomy. She didn't lead protests or become a movement spokesperson. That wasn't her style. But she used her platform to normalize the idea that abortion was sometimes the right choice, that women who had abortions weren't all traumatized or regretful, that choosing career over motherhood was legitimate. By speaking about her own experience, eventually she gave permission for other women to tell similar stories without shame. She proved that you could have an abortion, build a successful life, and never regret the choice, that abortion didn't have to be tragic or traumatic, that sometimes it was simply a practical solution to an unwanted pregnancy. Her honesty about not wanting children was equally important. She gave permission for women to opt out of motherhood entirely, to say clearly, "I don't want children," without qualifying it or apologizing for it. She proved that a woman could have a rich, full, meaningful life without ever becoming a mother. The 1934 pregnancy could have ended her career. If she'd continued the pregnancy, she would have been fired from RKO. Her momentum would have been lost. Her comeback would have been unlikely. If she'd had an illegal abortion that went wrong, she could have died or been left unable to work. The risks from every direction were enormous. She navigated those risks successfully by being willing to break the law, by having access to resources, by making a choice that prioritized her ambitions over potential motherhood, and by living with that choice without regret for the next 70 years. When she died in 2003, obituaries mentioned her 4 Oscars, her legendary career, her fierce independence. Some mentioned the abortion revelation, usually with careful language about the difficult choice she'd made. But it hadn't been difficult for her. It had been clear, necessary, right. The difficulty was imposed by a society that made abortion illegal and stigmatized women who chose it. Katharine Hepburn's abortion story isn't a tragedy. It's a story about a woman who knew what she wanted, made choices that aligned with those wants, and built exactly the life she intended. The pregnancy was an obstacle. The abortion removed it. Everything that came after, the career, the independence, the success, was possible because she'd been willing to choose herself. That's the real lesson, not that abortion is always easy, or always right, or always without consequence, but that for some women, including Katharine Hepburn, it's the choice that makes everything else possible. And that choosing yourself, your ambitions, your future over an unwanted pregnancy isn't selfish or tragic. Sometimes it's simply necessary, and sometimes it's the best decision you ever make.